Story time about the craziest thing I saw while working at a mental health facility. I work in a mental health facility as a psychiatric technician. My job is to help people with mental health distress by providing emotional support, helping develop positive coping skills, and provide medical attention. Some of the individuals that I treat have severe mental illness, which can lead to violence. One day I was assigned to a patient that I'll never forget. He was on a 24-hour observation because he was self-harming and deemed high risk. He had tried to harm others earlier in the day, so he was locked into a padded room with only a bed, a bathroom, and a tear-proof blanket. I was assigned to watch him for the day from outside of the room to ensure that he wouldn't harm himself until he could be seen by a doctor. He was talking about things that made absolutely no sense, running around in circles inside of the room and asking me if I was Jesus. He would start screaming at the top of his lungs about random things, curse at me 1 minute then apologize the next, and kept spitting on the window just to wipe it off a few seconds later. I attempted to calm him down, but he was on a rampage. At one point, he turned his back to me and appeared to be rubbing his eye for some time. However, when he turned around, I almost passed out. He had ripped his eyeball completely out of the socket and began tossing it up and down in the air while calmly singing to himself. The situation only got worse from here. Part 2 of the craziest thing I saw while working at a mental health facility. The man continued throwing his eyeball in the air and catching it while calmly singing slow jams. In disbelief, I immediately called for the guards to come and help me. As they came running, I told the man to stop playing with the eyeball and put it down. He then flashed me a smile and put his eyeball close to his mouth. I knew where this was going, so I begged him not to do it. He proceeded to put his eyeball in his mouth and began intensely chewing it. The guards unlocked his door and rushed in. He was jumping and running around trying to avoid them. When they finally got him restrained and under control, they told him to open his mouth and spit out the eyeball. Sure enough, he quickly swallowed it. I asked him why he would do that, and he told me that President Ronald Reagan told him to. He said it's okay because he still has another eye left and he could see just fine, and that he only wanted to have one anyway. That's when the ambulance arrived to come and take him to the hospital. When the paramedics asked him what happened to his eye, he proceeded to throw up on demand in front of everyone. He pointed to his chewed up eyeball and the pile of vomit on the floor and asked them if they could put it back in his eye socket for him. After going to the hospital, he was transferred to a different facility for a higher level of care. To this day, whenever I see someone rubbing their eye, I get squeamish. Story time about how I was saved by drag queens. My friend and I had made plans to meet up over the weekend to grab a drink. When I showed up, my friend texted me last minute billing due to a family emergency. Since I was already downtown, I decided to grab a drink by myself. I take myself out on dates all the time, so I didn't think it was a big deal. While I was walking to the bar, this guy approached me and asked what I was up to for the night. I told him what happened and he invited me to hang out with him and his friends. I made it clear to him that I wasn't looking for anything other than friendship, and he quickly replied that he respects it. With this, I felt more comfortable and started hanging out with him and his friend group, which was a mix of guys and girls. We all made our way to the bar and started drinking. That's when I befriended another group of people. I introduced both groups to each other and everything seemed to be going great. A few people from the new group came up to me and asked me how long I've known the guy for. I told them that I just met him an hour ago. They gave me a funny look and told me that he's been talking about me like we've known each other forever and are dating. I was a little creeped out, but I thought that maybe he was just drunk. That's when they said he's also been going around the bar talking to random guys about selling me. This is when my heart dropped and I started to panic. I was terrified because I was alone, drunk, and felt like this man had something terrible in store for me. Part 2 of how I was saved by drag queens. When the people from the new group told me that this guy was talking to them about selling me, I was shocked. I stood there for a minute in disbelief as I racked my brain thinking of what to do. I was too drunk to drive home and I was paranoid of everyone around me at this point. When he wasn't paying attention, I slowly made my way out of the bar. I bolted it to my car and decided that I would sleep it off until I sobered up. When I was a few feet away from my car, I hear footsteps running behind me. I glanced back to see the guy from the bar running towards me. Panic jolted through me and I quickly unlocked my car door. I jumped in and locked the doors behind me. He tried to open the door and then started pounding on my driver's side window, threatening me. A few minutes passed, but he wasn't letting up. Suddenly, someone pushes him to the ground and I look up to see that it's a group of drag queens. I thought I was seeing things for a second, but they tell him that they saw everything and if he gets near me again, they're going to rearrange that ugly mug. He stumbles to his feet and sprints off. I think they could tell that I was shaken up because they invite me to come to their show at the bar nearby to calm down. They spend the next couple hours with me as I watch each one perform and made sure that I got home safe by the end of the night. I'll always be thankful to them. Story time about how my friend scheduled her wedding on the day of my family's death anniversary. 7 years ago, I lost my husband, daughter, and mother to a car accident. They were hit by a drunk driver that drove through a red light and killed all of them on impact. Their deaths greatly affected me. If it weren't for my friends and years of therapy, I would be in a much lower place. I'm thankful for their support and have been able to process my grief properly. 2 years ago, I took a better paying job and moved to a different city. It's a 7-hour drive, but I travel back occasionally to visit friends and of course my family's graves on their death anniversary. My friend Amy announced that she was engaged last year to her boyfriend of 3 months. My friend group and I were shocked because we never met him or knew that she was even dating anyone. Nonetheless, we were happy for her. They postponed the wedding due to COVID, but now the cases in my country are less than 10 and she's having it. Last week, Amy called me to tell me that she scheduled her wedding on the same day as my family's death anniversary. She asked me not to visit their graves and attend her wedding instead. I asked her why she picked that date and she told me that she wanted to and I can't gatekeep a date. Then I asked her why I can't visit their graves and she said it's because she doesn't want my sadness and grief to take the attention away from her wedding. When I told her I wouldn't miss visiting my family's graves, things got complicated. Part 2 of how my friend scheduled her wedding on my family's death anniversary. I tried to compromise with Amy and tell her that I'd attend my family's graves after her wedding. She said she wanted my support for the entire day and dedicated towards her, but she'd think about my offer. She was there for me when they passed and I'm torn, but I refused to miss going to their graves. I called my other friends to let them know what Amy asked of me. They were livid for me as they had no idea what Amy was planning for the wedding. We arranged a Zoom call and discussed why she was being so insensitive towards me. It started off calm, then Amy just blew up. At first, she tried to explain that having a wedding on the same day would turn a negative situation into a positive one. When she realized it wasn't convincing enough, it felt as though a mask had fallen from her face and she started yelling and insulting me. She said she's tired of having to play the supportive friend role and that it's been 7 years, so I should just get over it by now or go join my family in the ground. My friends lost their anger and called her every name in the book. It hurt to have lost another person in my life, but in a sense, she never really was a good friend. None of our friends are going to the wedding now and have all blocked her on social media. My friends offered to go visit my family's grave with me and I accepted. We're planning to also make a scrapbook with my family's pictures in it. For once, I'm actually looking forward to this day. Story time about how a guy I hooked up with posted me on an explicit website. In the summer of 2018, I was a senior in high school and worked at a bike rental shop. I was always kind to the customers, but also careful not to be too friendly. One day, it was a few minutes before closing when this group of college guys came into the shop to rent out some bikes for the week. I gladly helped them with the rental and got all the bikes ready. As I was sizing them up and chatting, all the guys were being really friendly and telling me about all their fun plans. I finished getting their bikes ready, and before they left, they asked me for my Snapchat. I never gave out my personal information to customers, but I let it slide because these guys were so fine. I started talking to them on Snap over the next few days, and one of them caught my eye. His name was Tom and we just clicked. He was easy to talk to and he would even come by the shop to say hi every now and then. We were flirting with each other a lot and he finally asked me to hang out with him. During our first hangout, he invited me back to the rental house where all of them were staying for the week. I spent the night and we hooked up. The next morning I left and throughout the week we kept messaging each other like normal. Things seemed to be going great until I woke up one morning and saw a heart-dropping text from Tom. Part 2 of how a guy I hooked up with posted me on an explicit website. When I woke up in the morning, I saw a text from Tom. When I read it, my heart dropped and I felt like I was going to pass out. In his text, he said, "Thanks for the content," followed by a link to an explicit website. When we hooked up, he asked if he could record it. I was into that kind of thing, so I agreed but made sure to tell him I didn't want anyone else to see it. When I clicked the link, I saw that he had posted the video on this website and it was already racking up views. I was mortified. I tried to text him and the other guys, but they had already blocked me. To make matters worse, the following week, everyone at my high school found out about the video. I don't know how they got a hold of it, but I'm guessing someone came across it and recognized me. The whole school was sharing it and talking about it, and I was so embarrassed. Then I was called into the principal's office along with the guidance counselor and my parents. I ended up getting my phone taken away for a month, followed by my boss giving me a lecture about why we don't give out personal information to our customers. We contacted the police, but we never heard back from them and it ended up being a dead end. Even though my parents were furious, they were still understanding. Thankfully, we were able to get the video taken down. I never heard from Tom or those guys again. This is how a phone call from my mom saved my life. When I was 15, I started working weekends at a skate park over the summer and I was the only female employee there. They'd host a ton of events and rock shows. These events were extremely fun and all my friends would hang out there for a good time, so we got to know the owners pretty well. The two guys who owned the shop were in their 40s, overweight and balding. Their names were Doug and Mark. Doug was married with kids, so he was always more serious about the business and rarely joked around. However, Mark was a single dude who was outgoing and silly. He was always joking around and pretty chill, so we always had a fun time with him around. There were a few red flags that I ignored, such as how Mark came up to me at one of the events and picked me up, tickling me and spinning me around. I awkwardly laughed it off, but I was creeped out. Another time, I noticed him giving me flirty looks and sticking his tongue out at me. It felt inappropriate, but I shrugged it off thinking it was all in good fun. That was until one day when the fun stopped. Mark called me to the back room. Doug was on a phone call in the front, and when I got to the back room, Mark picked me up and set me on a washing machine. This is when he tells me he wants to kiss me. I automatically shut him down. He then tries to persuade me to lift up my shirt for him. Again, I tell him no and hop down, proceeding to walk towards the front, thinking that was it. I had no idea how much danger I was really in. Part 2 of how a phone call from my mom saved my life. Doug opened the door and asked what we were doing, followed by asking if Mark showed me their butterfly collection. I awkwardly said no and walked out. Around 5 o'clock, Doug asked me to go with Mark to run some errands. All I could think about is how awkward the ride was going to be as we hadn't talked since the incident. Mark drove us to the other side of town to my high school. We pull in the back parking lot on a Saturday. I asked what we were doing there and he said he was scouting for a new area for a skate park behind the school. He gets out of the car and motioned me to go with him. Then he leads me to an area with dense forest-like woods. He urges me to go with him into the woods, telling me to take his hand to show me the spot. At this point, I'm panicking and debating on making a run for it. That's when my cell phone rings and I quickly answer it. It was my mom and she asked if she could come pick me up early to go to dinner. With a sense of urgency, I tell her, "Yes, I'm at the high school, come get me now." I think she heard the fear in my voice because she made it there in 5 minutes. I told Mark my mom was on the way and I had to go, and he seemed pissed. He walked with me to the front and didn't say bye. My mom picked me up, asking if I was okay. I was in shock, but said yes. I went straight home and quit that very day. I'm 100% convinced that he was planning to do something terrible to me in those woods. I had feelings for my coworker, but I'm engaged. I work in the medical field in a busy hospital. It feels like we've been short-staffed forever, and it never seems to improve. This leads to us having to work double shifts almost daily. The money's great, but I'm rarely ever home. Sometimes we even sleep at the hospital and don't go home for days at a time. The people I work with are amazing and almost like family. At the moment, I see them more than my actual family. We all look out for each other and we're super close. But some of us might be a little too close. There's this guy I work with named Jason that I've developed feelings for. When you're with someone almost 16 hours a day, I guess it's bound to happen. The problem is that I'm already engaged to my fiance at home. It started out innocent at first. Casual, light flirting here and there, so subtle at times I didn't even think anything of it. One of those situations where you start out as friends, but things keep progressing. I knew my relationship was in jeopardy when Jason and I started texting when we weren't working. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop the conversations. If I'm being honest, at times I would be the one to text first and take the conversation away from the friend zone. I haven't talked to my fiance about it and I'm scared to death too. I still love him and feel terrible that I have feelings for someone else, and I haven't even gotten to the worst part of it all. Part 2, I have feelings for my coworker, but I'm engaged. I didn't tell my fiance about Jason because I felt like this was only happening because I was never home. I felt like hardly seeing him had to be the root cause of this mess. I talked to him about making more of an effort to see each other despite my crazy schedule. This worked for a little while, but I still had feelings I couldn't deny for Jason despite trying to suppress them. I even told Jason that we had to keep things strictly